Welcome to another episode of the Enlightened Musician Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Light, and today we're going to talk all about branding and graphic design and how that affects you as a musician or any business for that matter. I have the perfect guest. She may not be a household name, but the products she's been a part of designing are. For over 15 years through her company Derived Marketing as lead designer. She's also had a successful co-started her own line of essential bags called Derived, as well as doing logo and branding freelance work on her own. In her free time, you'll see her hanging out with the cutest shitzu pups ever in Utah. I'm happy to welcome one of the best graphic designers I know, and as an added bonus, I'm blessed to call her family. Here is Amanda Beck. Hi, welcome.
Hi.
I am so excited that I conned you into being on the show.
I know that's
So,
quite the intro to live up to.
I know. I mean, you definitely are someone to live up to, so that's a good thing. So I felt like whenever I talk to a lot of musicians, one of the main things that I feel like they miss out on is actually starting their branding and their design work. And sometimes they try to do it on their own, and it really is a hindrance to their career. So I feel like it'd be a cool thing to bring you on, and maybe we can talk about some of the do's and don'ts and things you've seen while you've been creating designs for some major companies over the year and give them some ideas that could actually help them out starting on their own. So I guess that's the first question. What are some do's whenever they're first working with a designer? What's some things that they could go into on their first time and actually help them along when working with a designer?
Sure. I think, well, for starters, being a creative, I think sometimes people assume that if you're creative in one way, that you're creative in all the ways. So, like for example, I feel like I'm a really good designer, but I'm not good at interior design and that kind of stuff. So musicians are very creative. Obviously, musically, that's something something very specific to them. It doesn't mean that they necessarily are going to be good at design and branding and stuff like that. So I think to start, I think it's important to kind of maybe know yourself and know what you're good at and what you're not good at, and not being afraid to ask for help from a professional, because this is what I do all day, every day. So I feel like I have a pretty good. It's just much easier for me to do than I think somebody just kind of trying to do it on their own, and you don't have to. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I completely agree. And I think that's one good thing to note on. A lot of times people remark on certain things that I have as an artist that are some of their favorite things. So let's just take for instance, in my life, I actually went ahead and did something via a t-shirt design. And if anybody's seen it, it's just awful. I'm going to be honest. It's too much going on. And
I doubt that.
I didn't sell very many of them, but my highest merch item is actually something that Amanda came up with, and it's one of these. They're actually a sling bracelet and mugs, and she just she has the eye for it. She knows what people want, and I'm had such better success than trying to go at it on my own. And actually, I'm excited too. She just designed the Enlightened Musician Podcast logo, which I know will bring more people in. But I agree with you on that. I think musicians sometimes just assume that they're, creative and they can do everything. But honestly, I think that's stabbing themselves in the foot. So let's actually talk
and
up.
it's
What was
definitely
that?
it's definitely important, I think, to have part of you in the design and the items and things like that. Like that's we for sure want it to represent you well, because that's literally the whole point of it. It's just if you have a designer that has a little bit of experience, I think it will just really bring out the best part of that.
Yeah, so saying that, if I were to come to you as a designer, what's something that you would like to actually know in order to start thinking up any ideas more than, here you go, just send something back to me. I hope it looks good. Like, what's some things that people can actually do to help out the designer once they find them?
Well, I think it's important to know kind of who you're working with. Um, One of the things that I think helps me when I'm designing things for you is that I know you, right? Obviously,
Very true.
I know who you are. I kind of know what style you like. I kind of know your aesthetic. I know you as a person. I kind of know the type of people that listen to your music and the type of people that support you, and all of that I think helps more than people realize. If you're if you're gearing something towards older people, it's definitely going to look different than if you're gearing something towards younger people. If you're gearing something towards, a fun group of people that's just having fun or want something that's going to be cool or trendy or new or something like that, that's going to be very different than if you're going to like a corporate office and trying to get something designed for them. So I think, with you and I, obviously I know you, so that makes it much easier than I think it would be for other designers to maybe design things for you. But not everybody has a designer in the family, so I
For
get that too.
sure.
Um, but yeah, I think just a matter of talking about things, and just even if it's stuff that you think wouldn't really make a difference, it actually can. So I think letting the designer know a little bit about you, letting them know a little bit about the thing, um, the different products that you want for different events or things like that, that can help. You never, as a designer, you never really know what's going to spark that little idea of, oh, maybe it would be cool to do this. Maybe it would be cool to, if it looks like that. Maybe this color would work for that. So I think that kind of stuff is important. Um,
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think one thing that was good, one time you told me too, is actually giving a little bit of background. Like you said, so you already know me, so we didn't have to do the background, but
right.
being able to say, cool, this is my audience, this is my demographic, this is kind of the style music that I do. Maybe putting a little bit of other artists that you see and kind of showing some of their fonts and their text and different things like that that you kind of really lean towards and you like, I think will really help. And I agree with you on that. I also wanted to kind of dive into some stuff that maybe people don't know about. And this is one thing I know we talked about early on when I was first starting doing music and getting design work is within merchandise. And that's a big thing for musicians is actually getting merch done. But I didn't realize that I was almost shooting myself in the foot via the color schemes. I didn't realize that you had to have like a minimum and a maximum and actually would raise your price and whatnot. Could you kind of go into some of the rules that format to make it the most cost effective whenever you're getting also in the long run merchandise through that branding and design?
Well, anything you do, so also lucky for you, the type of design that I do all day, every day at my day job is what we call promotional marketing. And so a lot of what we specialize in are promotional ideas and items. So things you can give out at, you know, concerts or sell at concerts, merchandise. We do a lot of giveaways for like Utah Jazz basketball games, for our local baseball team, some of the universities here. So we do a lot of promos where people. So it's based around the actual item, not just
Mm-hmm.
advertising kind of thing. Um, but so I think so anything you do, just as a general rule, almost 100% of the time, the more colors you want to add, the more the cost is going to be. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I didn't even
Okay.
realize that because sometimes I think as artists, you're like, the more beautiful it is, the more colors, the more it will sell. And then you get the price tag back and you're like, oh my goodness,
Right.
I can't
Okay.
afford that.
Exactly. So, and it depends on the thing that you're getting done. There's ways to do things that it's like a full color print, uh, that's um, that's not going to be as bad. But as a general rule, if you can keep it to one color, two colors max, you're really gonna you're really gonna it's really going to be much more cost effective. And I think in the long run, if the design is done right, you don't need a whole bunch of colors to make it stand out or pop or have it be something that people, you know, see perceived value in. You don't necessarily have to do that if the design is done well.
No, and I agree. And I know one time, so a lot of times we get to see each other at Christmas is one of the main times, and we had a whole conversation on logos that were designed such the way that it couldn't be read. And I think
Right.
that's something to bring across too is making sure that people can actually see that graphic design and know exactly what it means and also not fall into a trap of thinking it says or means something else. So I know
Yes.
having a
Yeah.
conversation on that and misprints and whatnot like that, oh my
Yes.
goodness, is always fun to know about as well. But yeah, is there any don'ts that you would say whenever people are trying to work with you? What are some just don't do's?
Um,
Is that
I
even a
mean,
word? Don't do's?
in design, not really. I mean, honestly, uh, I would say um, maybe get a feel for the designer that you're working with, but listen to them because if you're working with any kind of designer, the chances are they've gone to school for this. They've had some experience in this. They understand fonts. I had a whole class in college on color theory. So, matching colors together, making sure that they look good together, making sure they're going to look how you want them to look once they're printed. Um, there's just a lot of knowledge and skill that designers have that I don't think people realize. So I would say just be open to what your designer is telling you. There's a lot of fonts that, uh, designers in certain circles will be like, oh, can you believe they use this font? Just because, we know better. So again, with fonts, uh, sorry, uh, again, with fonts, um, just make sure you're listening to your designer because they probably generally they're not going to lead you astray.
And that's crazy to
Um,
think, like in design school, that there is like forming different colors together to make sure that they actually cohesively work
oh,
towards the
sure.
design. I
Uh,
mean, who would
a
have known
whole
that?
a whole semester of color theory. My professor was amazing at UNC Greensboro. Shout out to the Spartans. It was one of my favorite classes in their design department. It was also one of my harder classes. I know people think that we finger paint all day, but that's not always the case. But yeah, so fonts and colors, listen to your designer. Again, if you're, also don't be afraid to give them feedback. If it's constructive feedback, I love that. If you genuinely don't like the direction I'm headed, I'm not offended by that. I want you to tell me, I don't like these colors. I'd rather keep them brighter, or I'd rather keep them more muted, or I'd rather use trendier colors, or, things like that. We designers should be open to that kind of thing because at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to be using this branding. You're the one that this is representing, and we're not mind readers. We are the experts, but we're not mind readers. Does that make
I
sense?
mean, no, it makes
So,
perfect sense.
yeah. So, don't be afraid. Don't be shy to say, I don't love this, but say it in a way that I don't love this, but this is what I don't like about it. Because then that gives us something that we can take and say, okay, they don't like this, so I'll move in a different direction on that one thing. Feedback is so important. And I've never met a good designer that didn't welcome feedback like that. So listen to your designer, but also talk to him. Um,
And
so I think
I think that's so
those are good
good.
ways to go about that. Um, Also, just technically speaking, if you are working with a designer, make sure that they're giving you versions of your logo. Um, just because you like this logo with this gradient in the background and in 19 different colors. Make sure that they're doing a version that's one color, or a reverse that's all white, or something like that, because when you especially are trying to actually get things produced like merchandise and swag and that kind of stuff, you're going to need a one color version, and you don't always you want the designer to control that versus the vendor that's making it say, okay, we can make this one color, because they're going to do whatever they think looks good, but they may not be a designer.
Well, and I think that brings a good point in case. Whenever you've hired your designer, you guys have worked together, you've come up with a design, you're like, I love it. What would you say your advice is when they're getting the formats back? What exactly format do they need? And I'll write these down for everybody and attach at the very bottom so you can keep this handy. But you talked about the one colors, but is there any design format they need it in that would help?
So almost, sorry, cut that.
No, it's good. So I just flew in and she has been having a cold. We both just got over colds today, and I think we're doing splendid.
We're killing it.
We're killing it.
So one of the things, almost all promotional items that you get made, they're going to need vector art. So a vector file, that's what every designer uses Adobe Illustrator to create it in, and they need to give you a vector file. So it's either going to be an AI, a .ai, a .eps. Sometimes a PDF can be vector, but as long as it's vector. And they need to make sure that all of the fonts are outlined, and generally having Pantone colors called out. I don't know how deep a dive you want to take on.
No, we're going to do a deep
design
dive,
stuff. Okay.
I will actually,
You're like,
anything
no,
that you
we are
say,
deep diving.
well, because that's the thing. I think a lot of people just scrape the service and then they hire someone, they pay
Sure.
good money, and then
Sure.
at the very end they just get like a
They don't
PNG
have
back.
what they
They're
need.
like, thank
Yeah.
you. But
Yeah.
anything that you say, if it needs to be broke down even further via the dictionary, I will do that on our outline that I'm going to put at the very end of the podcast,
Okay.
that you can have a checklist. So everybody that's listening, you're going to get a checklist at the very end of this that just kind of just walks you step by step of working with a designer and what you need at the very end of it. So yeah, deep dive.
Awesome. So, and I think this sometimes isn't only on the client's end. I think sometimes it's on the designer's end, because if you've never worked in a situation where you're actually getting a product made, like an item or a promotional merchandise or whatever you call it, if you don't work in that world, you don't necessarily think about what is needed. So sometimes it's on just the lack of the designer's experience working in that world too. But yeah, so as long as that you can get a vector file, whenever I do a logo for a client and branding, I'll send the AI file of the full color logo, a one color logo. I usually do a one color logo in black and a one color logo in white. So I send vector of all of those. I send a PDF, and then I send JPEGs, because you never know, just because to get it produced, you need vector artwork. If you're doing web or social media or stuff like that, you need JPEGs, that kind of thing. But I always send JPEGs that has a white background, and then I also send a PNG that has a transparent background. And again, I just never really know what people are going to use it for, so I like to make sure that they have all of the versions possible, so that they're all there, always there.
Yeah, and I agree.
So I usually do all that. Depending on what it might be, if I have the font file, so like, there's thousands of fonts out there. I have 40,000 fonts on my computer. So in order to make the font look like that, you have to have the font file. So depending on what it is, I will sometimes send the font file to people if I think it's something that they might need in the future. Not everybody needs that, but sometimes, if the license allows, I'll do that. But yeah, so I think those are the basics.
Yeah, No, and I agree. And you brought up a good point. With everything that you do, you're going to use this in different formats. So you also mentioned with having the font files. So whenever you've designed certain things for me, for example, this Enlightened Musician podcast, within the website, I took that font and the color scheme and carried it over there because the more that you can actually carry your branding and make it consistent on all platforms, it actually it excels what you're doing and it makes you look more professional. So
Exactly.
sometimes it's like if the designer, you paid all this money and you have them and they've done such an amazing job, continue it on. But
Yes.
so I love that.
Well, yeah, and I work with smaller clients at my job that they'll send us logos that someone else designed. I have no idea where these logos came from, but
Mm,
they'll either send a PNG, which we can't use for that, so we have to figure that out, or it's just not. And I just think, man, your designer should have sent you all this. And so, so I try to, as a designer, I try to always tell people to make sure that you're sending people, what they can use. Because if they can't use it, then it doesn't matter how great the design is. If it's going to be hard for them to
exactly.
use, they're not going to.
Exactly. And I think that's good too. I've talked about in another podcast episode where I actually have an artist folder. So whenever you're doing certain things, you actually have like anything your graphic designer that's going to be in one folder that's for your graphics that you can always, copy and send to if you have like a web designer. Or I've also used the logo design for pictures. So they know the color scheme, they kind of know what's going around. So then that kind of matches and you can actually kind of use that to your own advantage and make sure everything's seamless. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with all that. Is there anything else you want to add, or are we going to talk about some fun stuff that's coming up with you as well?
I think those are the basics.
Yeah, and I'll
Uh,
put that in like a little checklist below, and everybody when they're, and also I did mention before the call, and I haven't said this yet. I know it's sometimes hard to find designers. I'm huge on working local, and obviously as local as possible is Amanda for me. But I do encourage if there are local designers, and there's a couple places that you can actually find them. I'm going to attach them below, and you can kind of, go through that list and see different people as well. Do you have any advice if someone's trying to find a brand new, just starting designer as
yeah,
well?
I am also a big fan of going local. And I think there are a ton of designers out there. And just because they may not have the biggest name or the biggest portfolio or anything like that doesn't mean they're good. It doesn't mean they're not good. It just means, they haven't had really a chance to really have something that's in a way that they can um, share. And, like I've mentioned with you, I have plenty of clients and projects that I can't mention that
Mm-hmm.
I'm attached to just because of, um, you know, non-disclosures, that kind
But
of
they're
stuff.
really
A lot of stuff
cool.
is about to come out, and you can't exactly, so just because you don't always know it doesn't mean it's not out there. Having said that, I would start, ask around, hey, have you ever worked with a designer? Do you know any designers? Do you know anybody that would know anybody that has a designer? And then I think it's always worth asking them, do you have anything you can show me that you've done? And, I have a lot of portfolio things that I can email to people and say, visually, here are some things I've worked on that I can't exactly just put on the internet for all of the world to see. But if I'm just showing you a couple of things that apply to the project that you're looking to get done, then I can for sure email back.
All right. So we were talking about finding a local designer, and you mentioned just actually we my internet's awful and it disconnected us. So we were talking about finding a local designer. So you just give the advice of contacting, where were we at?
Yeah, just looking for a designer. If you don't know anybody,
Mm-hmm.
um, just start by asking people, have you ever worked with a designer? Do you know anybody that would know anybody that's a designer? That kind of thing. Um, and you can also, I would say, if you do get a name or a contact, I would just say, hey, do you have a couple things that you could send me? So you don't need to see a full portfolio, but I think you can see enough of their work to kind of tell, if it's going to be the look that you're going for. Almost all designers kind of have a look in their work, even though their work may look very different. You can kind of tell they have a certain style, generally
Mm-hmm.
where they're more comfortable. So I think just seeing a couple of things that they've done um, tends to will help you figure out if it's going to be a fit.
Yeah, and I even said that to you one day. I actually saw a product in the store, and I was like, "Did you design that?" And it was so funny because you did. I'm not going to say which one it is, but
Yeah,
yeah, you can just tell a designer usually has their own style, and that's one reason why
right.
you pick them as well, is because if you guys match, they're going to represent you exactly how you see their work. So I think that's a
Exactly.
good thing when you see their work up front. So
And
that being,
I've done. Sorry,
no,
I
no,
totally I stepped all over your segue.
it's okay. This is our
You had a
family.
great segue, and I stepped right over it.
No, this is all of our family dinners and all of our family. We are
Yes.
notoriously known for talking over each other. The whole family. It's inherited. So,
It is. Yes, we
but yeah,
definitely
what were you
came
going
by
to
it
say?
honest. I would just say that isn't to say that I haven't done things that are outside of my comfort zone or aren't my particular style, because I definitely have, and most designers are asked to do that most
Hmm.
of the time. But I always think it's better if you have the option, if you can get somebody where they're in their comfort zone. I feel like it's going to come much more natural, and it's going to be easier on everybody.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So we're gonna do this segue. I love it. Here we're
go for it.
segueing.
I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
No. So I am so proud of Amanda right now. She actually just co-started her own essential bags line, and I'm obsessed with them. We're gonna actually talk about it. They're actually for essential oils, but I probably haven't mentioned this to you. I actually use them at every conference that I go to now because the
Awesome.
essential oil pockets are the perfect size for a USB. So
Yeah.
it's actually
USBs,
perfect.
AirPods, earbuds,
Hmm.
charging cables, lip balms. Yeah. They're made for
Exactly. So,
essential oils, but I also I use those pockets for everything.
so how exciting is that starting your own line that you get to design and you're actually the customer, or not the customer, you're the owner and the designer. How does that
Yeah.
feel via starting all that?
So it's it's simultaneously awesome and terrifying sometimes. As you know, with starting something new, especially if it's something that you aren't 100% sure on 100% of the things, it can be daunting,
Hmm.
to jump in and be like, here you go, I just have a bag company now. Um, you know, for my day job, that I've worked at for 15 years, I my partner for Derived, the Derived Essential Bags, um, her and I have worked together for almost 13 years, and we design bags all day, every day, as part of our job. And it's just something that comes really natural to us, and that part of it was super easy. Um, as far as getting the designs done, we worked really well together on that. It was super easy. Getting it produced was easy because that's her side of um, the partnership is pr- production.
Hmm.
Um, and so that part was even pretty easy just because we were familiar with that process. The harder things that were new for me in any ways, uh, or the social media aspect of it,
Yeah.
because that's just not something that I graduated from college almost 20 years ago. Uh, there
That's
were there wasn't really a lot of internet back then. There were definitely no social media, smartphones, that kind of stuff just wasn't a thing back then. So a lot of that has been a real learning experience for me. The
hmm.
website, the web store, that kind of stuff. The customer service side of it is something that's a little outside of my personal comfort level, but I feel like if you like what you're doing and you feel good about the product that you're trying to sell and you're doing it from an authentic place, I think even if you're not familiar with it, that's fine. Just jump in and handle whatever happens as it comes up.
No, and honestly, she is saying that she wasn't very good at the social media and whatnot, but if you look at the graphics and you look at the design work, the cool thing about, even though in her college it didn't have social media branding, you still are killing it. And I think design, that's the
Well,
cool
thank
thing
you.
about it. It just, lasts for years and years and years. And it isn't a testament just that it looks so clean and crisp. And I'm really excited for all that you're doing on that as well. And
Well, thank you.
honestly, I am so glad that you let you onto the podcast, and I really feel like you've been a very just huge value to our audience as well. And I'm excited for them to start looking into different designers and taking what you said and just kind of starting on that path and branding themselves and taking your advice as well with your design branding company, or not design company, but your essential bag company, that you just got to dive in, because whatever you love, you're going to do. And design is only a little part of that. And some people are uncomfortable with that. But if they pair themselves up to the right person, it's going to be awesome. So I appreciate you coming on,
You're
and
welcome.
we'll talk
And
soon. Oh,
one
what?
last thing. One
Yeah.
last thing. I had one of my bosses from very early on in my
Mm-hmm.
design career. He always said, "You don't have to know how to do everything. You just have to know someone that does." And I think sometimes people try to take on too much and try to be the expert of everything, and you're not always going to be that. And if you try to be that, it's just going to not be as much fun. So I'd say find people that are passionate about what little aspect of it that they have, and then work with them, and it'll be so much more fun that way.
I love that. I love that. That's going to be the quote for this whole entire
Yes.
episode. So, and that's the thing too. It's kind of pretty much completely segueing around to the beginning. Whatever part of the equation that you have to do for your business, if you're not good at it, find someone that is, and it's only going to make you stronger, and it's going to make the rise of the tides for everybody. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Amanda, for
You're
being on the
welcome.
podcast, and I'm sure I will talk to you shortly after.
Yes.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Enlightened Musician Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, theenlightenedmusician.com, where you can subscribe to the show on your platform of choice so you'll never miss an episode. Until next time, this is Lauren Light.